Hello and welcome to Rotted Reviews. Now, for those of you that are familiar with the term the second page of Google, basically what it means is if you're trying to search for something and you can't find it on that first page of Google results, good luck. There's also another adage that I'd like to tack onto that, and that is the second page of Amazon Prime horror results. If you go onto Amazon Prime and you look in the horror category, once you get past the first dozen or two selections, you start to get into some really weird territory, stuff of the dregs. And that is one of the areas I love looking the most to find my hidden gems. So looking there the other day, I came across a movie that was made in, released in 2020 at the very least, called The Goocher. And based on the name alone, I simply had to watch it. It looked like it was going to be low budget. It looked like, according to the description, it was made for $10,000. It also looked like it was going to be painful. But I still had to watch it just based on the name alone. And what I found about this movie is that it was incredibly painful and shouldn't be watched by anybody outside of a YouTube film critic trying to have a little bit of fun. This movie was a barely comprehensible mess with characters that I had no idea who they were, why I should care, what they were going through, or what they were doing, and neither did they, in a setting that seemed pretty lackluster against a conflict that I still don't quite understand. With a micro-budget and extraordinarily cheesy special effects, I thought that at the very least this movie could be a grundle of fun. But I'm sad to report that at the end of the day, tain't. So with like I said, with a micro budget, a lot of times what they'll do is they'll lean into it. The movie will be self-aware. It'll have a little bit of a wink and a nod and so forth to the audience. But this movie really didn't go that route. I couldn't tell if it was trying to have fun or if it was trying to be serious. If it was having fun, it really didn't make that clear. There was nothing about it that said it was self-aware. All of the characters and the storyline and so forth really took itself seriously, which betrayed it with the cheesy special effects and how bad they were. So it wound up in this weird, swampy middle place that just wasn't very appealing.
Hey, yeah! There ain't nothing like the smell of dead Goochers!
Now, to get into the plot, whatever plot there might be of this movie and what it's about, a group of people are drugged and dropped off in the woods to have a last person standing to the death contest of comeuppance, only to be haunted by an unquiet spirit of the woods called the Goocher. And it just kind of goes from there, derails itself 15 times on the way, and then ultimately end credits. Now, there are so many things wrong with this movie that it would be very, very easy for me to spend hours and hours picking it apart. Perhaps that might be worth doing on an academic level later on in my life. But for right now, what I'd like to do is just kind of focus on the broad strokes and the big things that this movie could have done better. Now, first of all, like I said, with a little bit of a wink to the camera and so forth, that wink to the camera is important. If you're going to have somebody swinging a sword at a character and have it met with smoke and explosions and skadoosh every time, at the very least, the characters could have some fun with things. The characters could have some fun dialogue and just lean into the silliness of it. Why have silly effects if you're not going to have the rest of the movie follow suit? It just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense on that regard. At the very least, if you're going to try and have serious characters playing things straight, then try and have the effects follow suit. Your tone needs to be consistent, and that is the last thing that this movie was. If you're going to have silly effects, like somebody swinging a bat at a character and then having sparks fly, as if they're made of flint, then lean into it. Be silly. Be a movie like Dude Bro Party Massacre 3. Just really go for it. Or Helen Keller versus Night Wolves. Those are movies that I probably don't I haven't given a hugely high score for, except The Intent, because that is where the rubber really meets the road, is whatever I thought of the acting, whatever I thought of the technical ability, how good was the intent? What was it trying to do, and how well did it achieve it? And that is where the real high marks come in, because it made me laugh to beat the band. This did not, because it wasn't funny. Didn't seem to be trying to be funny, except every single time an effect hit the screen. And that's not enough. I sometimes talk about tonal shifts. Well, you can't have that every single time an action sequence happens and then go back to a serious movie. It just doesn't really work that way. And having that frequent weird dichotomy of tone shifts, it just felt jarring, out of place. Nothing about it really worked. Either the special effects should have been trimmed down, kept simple, and stick to the low budget, have catch-up effects, whatever, but you don't necessarily need to go to the nines with Adobe After Effects, and if you're going to do it, at least do it well, or have the tone of the rest of the film match. Second thing, POV is important. It is ridiculously important, especially when you're constantly switching POVs. Point of views. This movie does a thing where it's constantly hopping from one foot to the next as far as a third-party disembodied camera, just like most other movies, where you have a camera just kind of floating around in space and the audience just is watching through it. And as far as the characters are concerned, it's not there. And then it puts up a camera reticle and in a POV mode, but it doesn't in a way that doesn't really work. It's a character will be holding their cell phone, recording into the cell phone, but you'll see them from a disembodied camera. Perfectly fine. But then that camera, it'll put up a camera reticle, an overlay. And that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Is it a camera that somebody's holding, filming the person doing the cell phone? It doesn't seem, appear to be that way. And it's constantly doing that. It constantly employs odd POV things and insists on doing a lot of different camera reticles in situations that just don't call for it, in situations where that person couldn't or, by all accounts, isn't there. It's taking the disembodied thing and simply putting somebody in the scene, but by all accounts, they're not there, and it doesn't match, it doesn't fit, it doesn't work, it's odd and it's jarring. And it's totally unnecessary. That's the part that got me, is why have it in at all? It just removed the camera reticle, and then all of a sudden the POV makes sense again. It really just took me out of the movie, which in this particular case was not the worst thing in the world. And the last thing I'll bring up is storyline structure is critically important. A movie is born and it's a foundation that it is built upon. It all comes down to the writing first. In this writing, we are supposed to have characters that are introduced in a logical, coherent manner. We are supposed to be given goals. We are supposed to be given conflicts in which a character is struggling to meet that goal, and then the journey that they go on down that. It doesn't necessarily mean they have to reach the goal, but the conflicts are in their way, and their story begins from there. It doesn't always have to follow that line. Sometimes movies will get kind of esoteric and odd. We have Eraserheads out there, and hats off to them for it. But for the most part, that is what 99% of well-structured movies have. It's a good guideline, it's a good skeleton, it's a good foundation to build upon. But this movie really took that and just threw it in the trash, and I have no idea why. I have no idea what they were going for, and I have no idea what their structure actually was. This movie opens with two, CIA agents or, spies of some sort being given their instructions from their laptop, via Bosley. And it has this really weird and extraordinarily long exchange of code words as they're going through and trying to find the proper, counter code word and so on and so forth.
Hello?
Hello?
Who is this?
This is your covert contact, Agent X.
Okay, but why can't we see you?
Otherwise, the laptop will self-destruct. And then they're told through their Bosley about the Goocher and so on and so forth. And then it does the drop-off in the woods thing of other characters. What happened to those agents? Don't know. They pop up once or twice in the movie, but back in that original setting. They don't actually integrate themselves into the storyline at all. Why did we need them to introduce things? I have no fucking clue. And the movie continues on with that. We have the characters that are out in the woods. They encounter the Goocher. You'd think that that would be enough to fill an hour and a half as far as conflict and back and forth and fighting with each other and fighting with the spirit. But no, things have to resolve themselves. In about half an hour, you wonder where the rest of the movie's going. Then all of a sudden it brings out more Goochers. Then it brings out more survivors. Then it brings out more people fighting the Goochers. It's a fucking mess. The story structure is non-existent. It just hops from one foot to the other of weird shit. And again, it doesn't even have the presence of mind to be silly about it. It takes itself too seriously, and then you have the effects that are skadoosh and explosions every time somebody hits somebody with a sword. It doesn't match. It doesn't work. Nothing about this movie made any sense whatsoever, and it ultimately just made for a painful watch. So now, I'm going to go ahead and throw up all the scores here. As always, 4 different categories, each one worth up to 25 points for a total possible score of 100 points. And as you might expect, the intent gets nothing. I don't know what in the fuck this movie was going for, but whatever it was, I didn't get it. It didn't achieve it for me. Was it trying to be funny? If so, it took itself way too fucking seriously. Was it trying to be serious? If so, it really betrayed itself. Was it trying to be coherent or interesting? Nope. So nothing about the intent really worked there. Everything else is mostly participation points. I didn't think it was the worst movie in the world. It certainly wasn't as bad as The Dread Ratlin, but it really wasn't anything worthy of note. Aside from making a little, like I said, a YouTube video where you just have a little bit of fun with the name, there's really no other reason to watch this movie. And on that basis, I really can't recommend at all 2020's The Goocher. So that should about do it. That's my review. Thank you very, very much for joining me here today. I look forward to seeing you in my next review. If you like this, please click like and subscribe. Remember, next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted.